You don't give his Twitter out enough.
At JF McMullen.
All right, just letting you know. You should be giving that out, all the time.
I think I say it daily.
Do you?
No, he definitely does.
I think what happens is you get so comfortable in talking with John since he's on at 4 o'clock every day that you don't treat him with the same respect that you would a guest that's on like Alex Kennedy once every couple of weeks and remind people about his Twitter account. I think you just blow over it.
Nah, Mike hits it. Mike hits the John Twitter hard every day.
At JF McMullen.
He does.
You do?
Yeah.
All the time.
Okay, maybe
I don't know.
Maybe I've tuned it out.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's you. It's not a me. It's a you.
It's a me problem.
Let's bring in at JF McMullen right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. This story that John wrote from Jason Kelce today. I think it's a very intriguing and worthy story of conversation here, John, because everybody seemingly is trying to find out what's wrong with this team. How come there's such a drop-off? Why are they different from one year to the next? Jason Kelce maybe has cracked the code, pal.
Yeah, I don't know if he has, because I don't think anybody knows what's gone wrong with this team. If they did, they'd fix it, and they wouldn't be where they are. I think Jason used the accountability word, and everybody sort of perked up and said, what's going on here? But I think if you dive deeper into what he was saying, he was really talking about chemistry and some of those veteran players we talked about that maybe they didn't produce on the field. Torrey Smith was one he mentioned. LeGarrette Blount, who produced at times. Brett Selleck, who was obviously at the end of his career, didn't produce all that much. Trey Burton was the third tight end, didn't produce all that much. But there was a chemistry and a cohesion there, and they sort of knew this offense, and he thinks that's been missing.
Yeah, he mentioned guys like Torrey Smith, LeGarrette Blount. He even threw Mac Hollins in there. But he also kind of said the coaches. I mean, I'm not saying he's taking a shot at Pederson at all, but he's kind of saying that the coaching held the team more accountable last year, right? Is that how you read it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think some people certainly took that as the veiled reference to Frank Reich and John DeFilippo, which we've talked about a lot. And that was, I mean, I talked about that in the off season. That was going to be a big hit, and it has turned out to be a big hit. And I think people sort of looked at that and said, it's not that big of a deal. And I think it was a big deal. And I think people should have learned from Andy Reid and the transition of coaches, because nobody obviously has a bigger coaching tree than Andy Reid in this league. And it started here. And he would take hits when he would lose good coaches. And sometimes the new coaches would get up to speed, but it would take a little bit of a while. And that just makes sense. It's the same thing as losing a player, losing a starter. I mean, the offensive coordinator is an offensive coordinator for a reason. And in theory, if you do it right, well, he's better than the receivers coach. And, so on down the line. So I do think that has certainly been a hit.
John, I wonder, as we know so much in pro sports, winning cures all, and at least is a great Band-Aid. Year one with Doug, there was some concern floating around the city that players walk all over him. He doesn't really have the control that we think he does, and this is a player-friendly coach, maybe to a fault. Year two, they win the Super Bowl. That wasn't even brought up. But year three, from Kelce to just seeing some cracks in how he's handled questions with the media to relaying information, do you sense anything at all either like that or maybe some sort of cracks forming in the dam in which not necessarily the message is lost, but it's beginning to fall on the early stages of deaf ears?
Yeah, no, I don't know, because if you look at somebody like Jason Kelce, I mean, he's always been up front and given his opinion, good times and bad. And there's certain players like that. Lane Johnson's like that. Malcolm Jenkins is like that. And that's not going to change whether the team's winning the Super Bowl or under 500. You're just obviously talking about more negative things when you're under 500. I think that kind of stems from it. From being behind the scenes, this is not even close to being sort of at the end of Chip Kelly where everybody hated going to work.
Yes,
this
I know
is not
that.
like that.
Right.
Yeah, this is not remotely like that.
And I don't think it is, and I don't think anybody really believes it's that way, but you go back and you can look at, well, it didn't just start day 2 with Chip Kelly's great day 1, and then everything went to you-know-what day 2. Do you see any signs of, beyond Kelce, of course, this year, let's look at this year wearing on the players versus Doug Pederson's message of, don't worry, we still have time, we're still going to fix this out?
You mean like Cole Hamill stepping in and saying, I can't wait for this season to end, like that kind of feel?
Yes, without saying that. Because the guys in the locker room won't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think losing wears on everybody, and I think that's natural if it continues to go this way. And I think, let's be honest, I think they're going to lose this weekend. And all of a sudden you're looking up at 4-6, and maybe it does take a turn toward even a darker direction. I haven't noticed that yet. It's still a team. And by the way, what I criticize them for is this mentality that, and they've been doing this all year, is it's look in the mirror, it's we're a play away, it's we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think they sort of default to the fact that they are Super Bowl champions. They are better than everybody else. That's the feeling they have. And I think maybe that should change. And it's interesting because we're back to the underdog narrative, because this is the first time they've been an underdog this year. And I think Doug is more comfortable with that.
Yeah, but they don't deserve it this year. John, they deserved it last year because – no, seriously, hear me out. Last year, the underdog was Nick Foles. Nobody believes in Nick Foles because he was a backup quarterback and because of what came attached with it. The reason why – but they were 13-3 football team. We knew they had a top-5 defense, and we kind of looked at that thinking, why would Vegas and other people outside of Philadelphia be so down on Philly just because they don't trust the backup quarterback? But here – they've given us reason and criteria to doubt them. So I don't equate the two I'm not saying you do. I'm just saying I don't equate the two personally.
No, I don't. I agree with you. I'm happy you say that. I told Mike that numerous times. I thought it was ludicrous, the whole underdog narrative last year, because everybody knew this was a good team. And it surrounded one player, as you mentioned. If Carson Wentz was healthy, didn't get hurt against the Rams, they would have been significant favorites against both the Falcons and the Vikings. Probably not against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, but nonetheless, everybody knew they had a good team. This time around, we all thought they had a good team. Turns out, team's not that good. Part of it is certainly injuries. I've talked about that before. It's not an excuse, I mentioned, but it is an explanation. And they have this sense that if they only execute properly, they'd be winning football games. I'm not sure that's the case because, and I asked Doug this earlier in the week, they played a clean football game against the Dallas Cowboys and still found a way to lose. There have been 2 games this year where teams have not been penalized. They got one of the 2, and somehow they lost that football game. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, John, you said not an excuse but an explanation. I like that line. And just to add to, well, that he's lost some key coaching staff members. Bill Belichick, just to bring up the Patriots, he's lost, I think, 8 assistants in his tenure, if not more, and that hasn't affected him at all. My point is, great coaches, it can be a revolving door for the assistants. That's how it should be. That means you're doing something right as a head coach. So for me, I don't use that as an excuse or an explanation. It's, guess what, bud? You're the head coach. Your assistant coaches did well enough to get a head coaching job. Next man up for the coaching staff. And so far, that has not been the case. I mean, what do you think Doug has learned so far this season dealing with all of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not using it as an excuse of they should have done a better job.
No, I know you're not. Yeah.
But also, I'm not going to compare Doug Pederson to Bill Belichick. I mean, that's arguably the greatest coach in NFL history. So I think he's the outlier. I think the normal way is when you lose coaches, you struggle a little bit more. And by the way, if you look at Bill's history, a lot of his assistants that got hired because of his genius haven't been very successful in other places. Whereas if you look at Andy's tree, you got a lot of success. So some have argued that even Bill goes the extra mile because he's such a sort of a micromanager that he doesn't necessarily want good coaches around him. He wants to do everything himself.
Right.
I'm not saying that's fair either.
No, I got you.
But as far as Doug and it was a tough situation because, again, he not only lost the offensive coordinator, he lost the guy who should have replaced the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
So now you're down to number 3 if you're looking to promote in-house. So maybe they should have looked outside the organization. And I go even one further. If you go back last year and you were to sort of, and I've mentioned this before, create a flow chart of the hierarchy of this offensive coaching staff, it would have been obviously Doug, then Frank, then John, then Jeff Stoutland, then Deuce Staley, then Mike Groh. And Mike Groh leaped all of those people.
But who made that decision?
Well, Doug made that decision because he felt that Mike's background, being a former quarterback in college and a former coordinator in college, was better equipped to handle the job long term. And by the way, maybe he's right, but there was going to be some hiccups along the way, and I think we're living through them.
Yeah, because yesterday, remember, we talked to Spags, and we asked him about, like, when you lose coaches, and sometimes it's not the knock on the coach. Like, maybe Mike Groh is a good coordinator and will be somewhere, but maybe, you get in a room, have 3 guys who have a conversation, and they click, and they have good conversation, and it just feels right. You put 3 different guys in there, and it's, a clunky conversation. That doesn't mean that the first 3 guys know more than the other 3 guys. It's just that they don't have the same chemistry. That could be what's going on in that coaching room, that maybe they just don't have the same chemistry or feel or trust in each other that the previous 3 guys had.
Oh, I don't think there's any question, and that's what I said. I mean, Doug has gone on record a number of times and said Frank Reich was his, and this is his word, not my words, voice of reason. He had tremendous trust in Frank Reich and John as well, John DeFilippo as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it's there with this group yet. I'm not sure how it could be there. But again, maybe you get there a year or 2 down the line. But I certainly think I don't think it's there yet, and I think it's affected this team because, look, when you're supposed to be at your best is those first 15 scripted plays, and that's when the Eagles have been their worst. And I can't explain it because, and we'll circle back to Andy Reid again, if you look at the best preparation coaches in this league, they all come from Andy Reid. Look at what Matt Nagy has been able to do in Chicago with Mitchell Trubisky, and watch their first 15 plays every week. It's amazing. Look at Doug last year coming from the Andy Reid tree. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and the only thing missing is Frank and John DeFilippo.
Yeah, they haven't even been able to adjust nearly as well as they were last year, and I don't know how much that falls down with Jim Schwartz as well, because he's dealing, we've talked about this, I feel like all week, with the level of success that he had last year with this defense as well. I just think moving forward, I wonder if this Eagles team looks at this season and says, well, we have obvious issues like the health and longevity of guys like Darren Sproles and Jason Peters, but what do we do with maybe some more subtle issues like Vitae coming in spell positions, or the fact that guys have been hurt, Jalen Mills? So I know the season isn't over technically, but for all intents and purposes, when they lose to New Orleans, John, that's it. How do you think this season is looked at? A couple of tweaks away to get back to where they were last year, or you know what? Without firing everybody, this was a disaster.
Well, number one, I'll disagree with you. I don't think it is over. But that has more to do with just how bad the NFC East is.
So if they lose to the Saints,
I still think Washington's coming back to the pack. I don't think they can withstand all the injuries they've had on the offensive line. I just go back to that game last week. They won it. They deserve credit. But if you look at that game, they were awful. And it's amazing Tampa Bay found a way to lose that game. So I think they're coming back to the pack. Dallas is not running away from anyone. So by no means am I saying the Eagles are going to win this thing. It's certainly become much more difficult. But I do think because of the dearth of opposition in this division that it's not over. Now the expectations have changed. All you're looking at is a division title in maybe the worst division in football versus going back to the Super Bowl again.
Yeah.
But I think if this team recovers somehow and is able to win the division, I mean, I put that in the success category. I really do, even if it's one and done in the playoffs.
Well, if they recover from where they are now, I guess that means they closed out the season pretty strong. And look, I'm not one of those people that says, you haven't shown me over the 10 weeks that you're not capable, therefore you're not. In this league, it's so week to week that they might just win 6 straight. You know what I mean? Like, you see teams, if I saw Houston play for the first 3 weeks, I'd say this team hasn't shown me anything to think they can go on a 6-game win streak. Well, what did they do? They went on a 6-game win streak. So it's possible, but they're running out of time, and their schedule is not very favorable. That's the one issue I have is you have almost built-in losses. This game, it's one of the more one of the bigger tests that you're going to have is going on the road to win in New Orleans, even when they're average.
But you know what? If we're talking on Monday, guys, and the Eagles win this game, are you that shocked?
Yes. Tell me where we're
Buffalo,
eating, I'll buy you the steak.
Free dinner.
I'll be shocked.
Buffalo was a 17.5-point underdog at Minnesota. They won that game. I'm just saying, crazy things happen in this league.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, John. I'm not on like the shocked side of things. I don't think if you ask me if they're going to win the game, I'm going to say I don't think so right now. But I'm not sitting here on Monday like, oh my God, what a shock.
Okay.
You sound like you'd be shocked.
Well, yeah, because
exactly, and that's where I am.
And John, isn't the difference? I'm sorry.
You know, Teron Armstead, for instance, is not playing. That's the best left tackle in football this year so far. Now, what if all of a sudden Jerome Bushrod's going to go in there? What if he looks like Big B? And he'll probably look worse than Big B. And all of a sudden, things break down for New Orleans because of one injury. I'm not saying it's going to happen because Drew Brees is as intelligent as they come. He'll realize he's got to speed things up. He'll realize that he doesn't have his left tackle. But as I always say, the NFL, this is not Alabama against Louisiana Tech.
No, but
I mean, anybody can jump up and beat you in the NFL.
I agree. And the only thing I would add to this conversation is that the difference, it seems like this year with the Eagles versus the Bills or Louisiana Tech or a team that just gets written off maybe weekly, is that even at the situation right now, John, the Saints aren't going to overlook the Eagles. The Saints are going to come in and look at us, stick it to the Eagles for obvious reasons and also for the fact of the Super Bowl victory. So the defending champs, I think that's why I look at it and think it's going to side me more to I'd be shocked if they won, not because, and you're right, crazier things have happened in this league even this year. I just think that teams are still not letting up on the Eagles, nor will they, even because of the Super Bowl championship.
Well, you're probably right, and I know the Saints kind of felt that they would have won here if
great point.
The Vikings didn't beat them. Alvin Kamara said that specifically. A number of Saints said it specifically. So I do think they want to prove that they're better, and obviously they're playing well and clicking on all cylinders. So I don't expect the Eagles to go down there and win. And the only reason I have any optimism for this team is because, as I said, of the division, more so than what the Eagles are doing. We're through 9 games. If you want to talk to negative, Mike talked about winning 6 straight, maybe even running the table, pulling an Aaron Rodgers. Well, we're through 9 games, and they haven't won 2 straight. So I don't see that happening either.
Well, for the record, I'm not predicting that either. I'm just suggesting that in fact, New Orleans, if you're looking at something, they've won 8 in a row. I mean, you always have that in the back. Right, you always have that in the back of your mind is, are you really going to win 9 straight games? Now, the Eagles did it last year, but how many times in a season does a team win 9 straight games?
Right.
Doesn't happen all that often. Not to mention, how many has L.A., the Chargers, they've won, 5 in a row? Somebody else has won 6 in a row. So these teams have lost and then gone on big streaks. I don't know that I see that happening with this team. But tomorrow we have full coverage of this game. Mosher, McMullen, and Krause. Tonight, I don't believe it will be on location due to the weather in that area. But those 3 guys will be pontificating more about this game.
Can we get a weather update?
8.
Where are you, J-Mac?
I am home in South Jersey. It's not good, but I would have made it to the Landmark.
You would have made it to the Landmark.
Because you live next door.
Mosher would have made it to the Landmark. The problem is Krause can't get to the Landmark. I don't know where he lives, but he told me it was a disaster where he is.
Well, I have to go back that way. You need some help?
That's a good idea.
Well, as long as I can take Krause's talent fee, I'm more than happy to step in.
You would need to take his equipment, too, and he can't get it there. That's the big issue.
I have – no, you're right.
All right. Tomorrow we'll have –
the weather forecasters, though, are 0 for 1. They've had 1 chance. They're 0 for 1. They're having a bad season, too. So
it's like the Eagles with Golden Tate.
We got to break them down.
All right, pal. We'll talk tomorrow. We'll get your pick.
All right. Thanks, guys.